Here. Good evening. I will call to order Wilsonville City Council meeting for August 5, 2019 at 7:14 p.m. I apologize for the lateness. We've been in debate upstairs and just got too far ahead. So could I have a roll call, please?
Councillor West.
Here.
Council President Ackerval. Here. Councillor Lehan.
Here.
Mayor Knapp.
Here. Thank you. Will the audience please rise and join us in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And council, I would be open to a motion on order of agenda.
Your Honor, I move to approve the order of agenda.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. There are copies on the counter at the side of the room. If anyone would like to have one that does not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye passes 4-0. We only have 4 people because we're down 1. We're in the midst of a councilor recruitment and appointment process. Communications. We are pleased to have Senators Thatcher and Olson with us this evening. Would invite you to come forward and illuminate us as to, what you can. Good evening, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. I guess I will assume this proceeds sort of like a legislative hearing and that I need to identify myself.
Yeah, well, you're on TV, so not
Okay.
everybody might know.
All right. Well, I'm Senator Kim Thatcher. I represent District 13, and Wilsonville is part of that district. So happy to be here. And I was happy to host the Wilsonville Citizens Academy a few months ago. It's been that long. Anyway, it was fun to be able to do that, and it's good to work with Greg and Mark and yourself, some of the people who have come down to legislate or to ask for legislation or support for or opposition to, usually support for legislation. It was fun to work with you. The Boone Bridge, of course, is we were talking about that a little bit earlier, and I think Alan will go into it a little bit more because he had a bill that we hoped would kind of take care of this problem once and for all on the congestion that's on I-5, especially in the afternoon. And I had to come back from Portland today just to, I wanted to be here. And I took 99 just to avoid I-5 on the way down, and cut over at Aurora, because it's a problem that really needs to be taken care of. But we were able to get some funding in the what you call the Christmas tree bill at the end of the 50-50 bill that was passed at the end of session. So we have a cost to complete study, so we'll have a little better handle on how much that'll be. There were I know that the city's interested in PERS issues, and there was a little bit of discussion about that during session. There was a bill that was passed. It will help the city, I think, a little bit. I don't know that it's a really comprehensive attack. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm sure the people who are PERS recipients think it's an attack, but the ability for cities to be able to fund their services without having to pay in too much and more as time goes on to the PERS system. QBS, that passed, allowing you to be able to conduct procurement for architectural engineering and photogrammatic mapping services while considering pricing policies and not just some of the other criteria that were only allowed at that time. So that was improved, I believe, for the city, and that should make things go better for you. I'm on a few different committees. One is the Legislative Audits Committee, and it's a joint committee with the House and the Senate, and the members of the Joint Ways and Means Committee are also serving on that. Not all the members, but the co-chairs are on there. And recently, we're able to pass a bill that allows us, the legislature, to work more closely with the Audits Division at the Secretary of State's office, which gets us closer to having a legislative audits division, if you will, without it being an official legislative audits division. This is something I've been advocating for quite a while, because that's how we're able to delve into some of the cost issues that come up occasionally. And we're one of the only states in the nation that does not have its own legislative audits division. So this gets us a little closer. I was happy that was able to move forward. There was a lot of discussion around water, of course. Even though some of those bills did not pass that had to do with dealing with some of the water issues that have come onto the city's doorstep this past few, well, it was just last summer. But I think there's going to be like a work group that will help move some of these issues forward and make sure our drinking water is not disrupted like it has been in the past. I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, and that's a pretty diverse committee. There's a lot of things going on there. That was where some of the, I don't know, I think, what do you call it? Youth justice reform bills came through, and there was a lot of discussion about how to do that right. And unfortunately, for me anyway, they put it all in one omnibus bill, so that I couldn't support it as it was, but there were a lot of good things in it, and I think that there's a lot to be found that's good in the passage of that bill, and that was something that Senator Jackie Winters was also a big advocate of, and of course she passed away during this past session. Also, I had a bill that would help people who were in prison wrongly for serious crimes to be able to get DNA testing where it's available, and so that they can prove themselves not innocent, but at least cast some doubt onto their guilt, and that they would be able to pursue other avenues of justice so that they can find the right person to put in prison instead of this other person who hopefully can get their DNA tested if they've been wrongfully imprisoned. We also dealt with, just a couple years ago actually, the testing of rape kits. That was really important because there was a backlog of just so many. I don't remember the number, but there were so many kits, so that when a person goes through a sexual assault, they have to go and see a special nurse, and they have this very comprehensive exam, and the evidence collected from that was just sitting on shelves and gathering dust, and they weren't finding the perpetrators. So this was a good thing. And that was finished up during this past year, where they were able to get all these kits tested. The backlog has been cleared, and there are a number of people that are in jail now because of that. And so that's good. So the real perpetrators are being found. Daylight savings time was something that I was working on this last session, and just a little update. What I was trying to do, because the last time I was in session, the long session, I introduced it was a couple sessions ago actually, I introduced a bill that would end daylight saving time, and I got a lot of complaints about that. People were saying, we don't want to end daylight saving time. We want to keep it all year long. And I'm thinking, well, you're right. We already have daylight saving time 8 months of the year as it is right now. So there were also some other states pursuing this, and I decided, well, it's more likely to get approved if we work with the states that are around us. So trying to work with Nevada, they haven't really reached out to us, but with Washington and California, we were able to make some contact, and we're kind of moving this in the same direction as far as keeping daylight saving time all year round. So we would be affecting the 4 months of the year that are in the winter. And of course, we would exclude the part of the state that's on mountain time. They'll just let them stay with Idaho. But what happens next? This bill passed. What happens is if Washington and California adopt this, and there's a lot of ands and ifs here, and Congress approves the ability for a state to adopt daylight saving time year-round, then we could move forward with it. And it has an expiration date on it. If this doesn't happen within a certain amount of time, I think it's about 10 years, then the bill goes away. So that's where we're at on daylight saving time all year round. I think it's not going to pass in time for this fall, but maybe in 2020 we'll see something happen there. Washington actually passed a bill similar to ours, and California has until the end of next month actually to get something through for their legislative session this year. And just for a little bit of interest on how many bills we get flying through that marble palace down there, there were 338 Senate measures that passed both chambers. There were 361 House measures that passed both chambers. Altogether, total bills introduced, total bills introduced during this legislative session, 2,768. And of those, 758 passed off the Senate floor. And I think that would probably be about all that passed both chambers. Sounds about right. Check me if I'm wrong there. So anyway, just a little bit of an update. 30,000 foot level. Hoping Alan will weigh in and we can talk, especially about the Boone Bridge, because that was something that I know he was a huge advocate of, and we were trying to get that built, not just studied, but built. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Olson, good evening.
Thank you. Senator Ellen Olson, I represent Senate District 20, and Charbonneau is in Senate District 20. Quite interesting that just across the river becomes my territory and not Kim's, but it's really a pleasure to represent Charbonneau, and really a pleasure to have you folks from Wilsonville come down and visit with us and talk about what you need. And of course, one of those things was the mess on I-5. And it was very apropos that we talked about the fact that the ramp that runs from the Charbonneau side all the way to Wilsonville, which I just took, really helps traffic. I don't have to merge and come back again, but that's not the same on the other side. And they actually improved it because they put 3 ramps going up to merge down into one, to merge into the freeway, then to get off on the Charbonneau side. It's quite an interesting little thing. But Mayor Knapp and Greg Leo and the folks came down and we talked about it, the importance of getting that ramp to run all the way across. And of course, we tried to tie it into Seismic upgrading the Boone Bridge. And in my conversations with everyone talking about it, they say, well, why should you jump to the head of the line? And I said, well, it's real simple, because if the Boone Bridge goes down in an earthquake, the state stops. We don't have any way to get traffic around. If the Abernethy Bridge goes down, well, we can still get around it. But when this one goes, all that traffic stops, and it has to go all the way out to Newburgh to try to get across that bridge, which I presume will also be down, and it'll be a real mess. So it was very important to get this done. Mayor, as we talked about, ODOT just kind of wants to drag their feet on it, and they'll eventually get to it. But we can eventually get to something that encompasses this amount of safety. We talk about the chance that we will have the big one. We're over the limit. I mean, it was supposed to be anytime after 300 years, and we're over that. So we can anticipate that there will be something that happens. And I anticipate that that bridge will be taken out of commission, and then we're going to have to work around it. And ODOT needs to really take a look at it. And as Senator Thatcher mentioned, we got some money to put in there so they can evaluate what it's going to cost to do the work. I think we were talking about, Mayor, I think we were talking about $40 million is what we were looking at to put into that project. But it's extremely important not only to the safety of the bridge, but also to the traffic itself. Because everyone knows in the afternoon or in the morning, whichever direction you're going, you're stymied. I mean, you're crawling. And it's unfortunate that happens. I've traveled quite a lot this summer, and I go to these cities and they have 5, 6, 7 lanes of freeway in one direction, and traffic moves. The argument is that, we want to reduce fossil fuels, but the CO2 output from a car running at efficient speeds is much lower than those sitting there idling at 5 and 10 miles an hour. So we really need to look at that. I'm on several committees of, they're important, but they're kind of a minor importance, business and general government. We had an interesting bill in there that a gentleman posed that everyone had to accept cash. And I go, well, who doesn't accept cash? Green dollars really, they look pretty good when they're given to you. But the problem stemmed from the fact that the marijuana growers can't bank typically. And when they want to go buy something, they have to do it with cash. So they wanted to be able to do this. But it turned out that we couldn't do it because vending machines, they take cash. But the gas that we allowed to be pumped in Eastern Oregon, the gas pumps are not vending machines, so they couldn't take cash. So we would violate our own law that we were going to pass. So that bill kind of went away quietly. I'm also on Environment and Natural Resources, to me a very important committee because we deal with everything, the forest, the trees, the wind, the water, everything. And we had some significant bills that went through there. I know the mayor mentioned it in the newspaper that we banned plastic bags. I was kind of disappointed in that, I'll be honest with you, for one simple reason, that we charged a nickel for the other bags. The reason being is I used to work in the grocery industry. The price of those bags is already built into the groceries. So we should be giving bags free. To add a nickel to it was just a bonus to the grocery stores. But interestingly enough, because we did the gross receipts tax, that bonus to the grocery stores is going to get taxed. And so it's going to come back to the state in some way, shape, or form. We have the technology to move those bags out of the system and into a very functional product, but people don't like that functional product. It's called the fossil fuel. Agilix out of Tigard has the process to convert not only those bags, but all kind of other plastics, including now styrofoam, to convert it back into useful products, which I think we should do. We need to look at technology to move ahead, not ban things that move behind. We ban fracking, but we don't frack in our state. And I just tried to do a quick analysis of what it costs to run a bill through. And when you run a bill through, you put up an idea, you send it down to LC, and a lawyer writes it. Then it goes out and it has to go to the committee, and committee administrator in the LPRO office, they have to schedule it, and it goes to committee, and then there's a couple people in there, and there's 5 senators in our case, and 7 House members, and they all listen to it, so that all takes some time. So I figured out it was about $15,000 to $20,000 to do a bill, whether it passes or not. And it's pretty expensive when we ban things that we don't even do. So I thought that was, a little bit beyond the pale. We also put a moratorium on offshore drilling, which, by the way, we don't do that either. So it was an interesting session. Everybody knows it was. They know what happened, what took place. I've been there. This is my 5th long session, and it was tedious. It was tedious. I've never seen such partisanship. People did not want to work together. And it was unfortunate because it's our job to go down there and work for the people of Oregon. And whether you're in the minority or the majority, our job is to represent Oregonians and make certain that the Oregonians get the best deal possible. And it seemed like it was almost impossible to get that done. I did get a single bill passed. Well, I shouldn't say that. I got 5 veterans bills passed, but they were committee bills. I am the chair of the Senate Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee, and we got 5 veterans bills passed, allowing if a military person comes to Oregon and they bring their spouse and their spouse has credentials like a hygienist or a beautician or whatever, they can now work in the state, and they have 2 years to be able to, if they stay longer than 2 years, they have to get recognized by Oregon, but in the meantime, they get 2 years to work in the state. And typically in that 2-year length of time, their significant other is transferred to another duty station. So that worked pretty well. We got a couple other things for the kids when they come in to get their grades, get their schooling recognized. And if a child is in college and the parent gets transferred, he can stay here as an in-state student to get in-state tuition for the family of the military folks. So I thought that was pretty good. I tried desperately to get a property tax exemption increase for veterans that were disabled, 40% and above. We got it passed in the Senate unanimously, and it got over to the House and kind of got held up a little bit and died in committee. The revenue director wouldn't let it out over there on the other side. She wouldn't let it come out of committee, which I thought was a travesty. Our veterans deserve all we can do for them, particularly to those that come back and that are disabled at 40% and above. But we weren't able to get that done, so we'll keep working on that. You know, so they often say it takes many tries at bat to get something done, so we'll keep working on that. I did get something done for Coffee Creek. It's not what I wanted to get done for Coffee Creek, but it's what I got done. A little bit less than it should have been. But in Coffee Creek, there has been several instances of inmates getting molested and taken advantage of. And there was actually one person that was prosecuted for those things that happened. And I wanted to have a bill that essentially put a stop to it. And what we got out of it was a study. Now, the study probably will work, but as study goes, we'll study for a year, and then we realize that, yes, there was a problem, and we should address it and take care of it so that prisoners, although they are incarcerated, still feel safe, so that they can come back out and go back into society without that stigma of something that happened to them in prison. That was a bill that was brought to me by a constituent who was an inmate at Coffee Creek and was very knowledgeable of the whole process. And she did a wonderful job of educating me and taking me through the process so that we could move this legislation forward. But it's difficult to get things through when just a small set of people see what goes on. Other than that, it was, you know, I shan't say business as usual because it wasn't quite usual what took place there. It was a very difficult session in the respect that we had the harassment issues hanging over us, trying to get that through. Senator Thatcher was on the conduct committee and she had to be gone, so I sat on the conduct committee for 2 different hearings. She gets to go back on it. I'm so glad she does. She certainly will enjoy it. The tone was not as it used to be. It wasn't that congenial, jovial, let's work together kind of atmosphere. It was kind of like, we're doing this. And you could see that in House Bill 2020 that had 116 amendments. Very difficult bill, very, very difficult bill. I could go into it, but you know, it did not get out to the floor. It needs a whole bunch of work, It's very expensive. People talk about the fact that it was misrepresented. So I will say a couple things about it. In the first year, it will cost 22 cents a gallon for gasoline. Their own economists say that by year 2035 to 2040, gas will cost an additional $3 a gallon. That's a fact. The first year, it will raise $550 million in the first year alone. It will create a new agency. It will get rid of the Department of Energy and create a new agency with at least 64 new employees to run this program. It will allow the governor and the director of the new agency to enter into contracts that we will never be able to get out of. And there's no oversight. So those are just a couple of the problems with the bill. And the most disheartening thing is that if we want to reduce CO2, let's reduce it. Let's go after it. Let's get it down. But we're only going to do 1 million metric tons a year. And that's, you know, drop in the bucket. A drop in the bucket. There's got to be a better way to do it. We need to look at how to get it done. But the bill itself, Quebec and Ontario both had cap and trade. Ontario got out because it was too expensive for them. They still do it. They still reduce CO2, but they keep their money in-house. And unfortunately for us, some of it was going to go, our money was going to go to California. I was on the Joint Carbon Committee, and I've been working with Cap and Trade ever since I've been on the Environment Committee. I have a deep background, lots of study on this legislation. It was difficult, but the problem with it is we were cut out. We didn't have the opportunity to make good, solid commitment to amendments to say this would be a better way to go. We just couldn't get that done. And so out of the 116 amendments, we had a few small ones put in. Other than that, it was tough. It was tough to sit in those committees. I mean, I spent hours and hours in those committees in the evening, listening to discussion, listening to the experts. And the one thing every expert said was, no matter what we did, it would be immeasurable for climate change. And that's unfortunate, because if we're going to do something, it better have a definitive outcome. It better actually produce something. You guys do it here in town all the time. You look at a project, you set a goal, you get it done, and it benefits everyone. And if you cannot measure the outcome, then you have to ask, what is the benefit that you're looking for? So it was tough. You know, we left twice. Not anything we really wanted to do, because we understand the importance of representing our people. But when the discussion came that, you know, you're insignificant, we don't care what you do, we had to make a decision, and that's the decision we made. So it was a tough one. It was a tough one, and it's really hard for someone that's like me, that's had medical problems, to have to deal with the stress and strain of what went on. I hope next session isn't that bad, but I think it will be. So she gave you the bright side. I gave you what every day looked like when we went to work.
Well, thank you both for your perspectives and your information. Council, any questions you would like to ask?
Is this my?
Councilor West.
One question. I think you'd be shocked if I didn't ask about foster care bills. Are we going to see any more substantial movement? We saw good bills die in the Senate that would have promoted adoption of especially teens in foster care that affects everybody in this state. And we saw bills that passed unanimously out of every single committee, unanimously out of the House, that would absolutely help vulnerable populations, our most vulnerable, die out of nowhere in the Senate. Do you guys see any movement? There was some movement, but it wasn't made the priority. We just had a news story break a week ago where another kid was serially molested within foster care. And it's just becoming like week after week, another child dies, another kid abused, another agency within Oregon completely failing. Are you guys committed to helping that population? And do you think that there can be any movement with that population and legislatively?
I'll take it. All right. Yes, I think so. I'm committed, and I know that is definitely a bipartisan issue. Sometimes, unfortunately, as sessions go along and as the schedule has to be met, things die, and things that would probably pass had they been given the chance, they kind of get lost on the cutting room floor, unfortunately. I do think there'd be a very good chance of passing something like, I don't know about the February session, but for sure the next long session. That and more, those bills that died on the cutting room floor, so to speak, and more, I'm sure would be able to be passed. It's such a broken system, and how to get at all these different problems and fixing and reforming that system within DHS is a huge undertaking. And there are some things that we can do meanwhile, and some of those bills were introduced. I think you helped bring some of those, shepherd some of those through. And they help, but it doesn't fix the system yet. And I do think that needs a deeper dive, and we do need to look at a little more closely the foster care system, because it is terribly broken.
I just want to say this really quickly, sorry, son, that I was in Salem a lot last session, and I'd show up in scrubs after 12-hour shifts, and I would just advocate for things that I thought that as a citizen of Wilsonville, just a resident that lives here, that was important. We talked about the bridge, but often foster care issues, and both of you guys were incredibly receptive. I heard accounts that you working bipartisan to get the study done on the Boone Bridge was, your work and advocacy was stellar, and I personally found you guys wonderful to work with, and thank you for the work that you've been doing for the city, but I'll keep pushing for those kids, so, yeah.
Councilor West, I had the opportunity, not this session we're in now, but the one before, to be on Human Services. And I would go home at night almost in tears. I really wanted to blow the agency up. I've never seen an agency so dysfunctional in all my life. And, but it's difficult to look at it from the outside, looking in. We need expertise to come in and say, we see the problems, we know the problems, how do we fix the problems? There's nothing more appalling to hear stories of children having to go out and shoplift feminine hygiene aids that they need because the home that they're staying at doesn't provide them. And then we find out later that the lady was indicted on embezzlement, stealing money from DHS. There were so many of those things that it was just disheartening. And I was over there all the time talking to them, how do we fix it? What do we do? The person that was in charge at the time gave me a great story that I love to tell, and it's sad that I have to tell it. He said that he had an open door policy. Anyone in the agency could come to him directly to talk about a situation, an incident, or to come in with an idea that could make things work better. And he said that the most disheartening thing that he heard was his subordinate managers saying that they hated that idea. They wanted it to go up through the ladder. And I told him, I said, if I was in your chair, you know what I would do? Those managers would be fired, be terminated. Because people that work with their hands in the field and see it day in and day out, they see what goes wrong. And they come up with ideas on how to fix it. And that never seems to be able to matriculate its way all the way to the top where it can be turned into a rule that can come back down and get done. And it was just appalling to hear that kind of thing go on. And just my few short years that I worked on that committee, I probably had 50 different groups come to me with problems from all over the state. And I was able to go through the director and get those things fixed, but we shouldn't have that. We shouldn't have children be farmed out to Montana and killed, or beaten, or children raped, or put back into homes where there are sexual deviants that live there. We shouldn't have that. And the fact that we're still allowing it to happen is our fault. The problem with the legislative body is we don't have enough power to go in and say, we're fixing this. We're going to audit you, we're going to do this, and then we're going to fix it. We can write the bills, but when the bills go out, sometimes they're not perfect because we're not perfect. And LC doesn't know all the minutia, and then they get turned into rules, and the rules don't work. And that's where the problem lies, is the fact that we have to get smart people in there that say, when we do this, this is the route it has to go to fix it. Because these kids are desperate to get back into society and to have a good, fair life, and we're not allowing them to have it. Although we put tons of money into them, it's just not working very well, and it's unfortunate. And I will try my darndest, along I know with Senator Thatcher, we will work on legislation to try to make this situation better.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So that was happy, right?
Yeah. Well, I do want to thank you both also. The Boone Bridge discussion, I thought, was very favorable. I was privileged to come and testify along with people and electeds from both sides of the aisle in front of the Joint Transportation Committee, and was pleased to see a unanimous referral out with a recommendation to pass that bill. It did go sideways after that, but it seemed like there was pretty significant recognition that this is a major impact on our citizens and on our economies. And I sure hope that that you folks that have a chance to be there will keep pushing on it in the future. ODOT has a broad range of priorities around the state, but I think that this is not an unreasonable request for this to be a priority for I-5. So we just need to keep working on that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think even if we can get this project done, it's going to help your community because it's going to make traffic move smoother through it, and you won't have the bottlenecks, and people will be able to get around your town and shop and do the things they like to do in town instead of having to go the back routes like I do.
Yeah, it'll help our city, and it'll help the people that have to pass through on the freeway.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk with us this evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That will bring us then to our citizens input and community announcements, which is an opportunity for visitors to address council on things that are not on the agenda. Also a time to address things that are on the agenda but not scheduled for public hearing. Staff and council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during this portion, either before tonight's meeting ends or as soon as we can thereafter. We do ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. I have a couple of speaker cards here. If there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak, please complete a speaker card and pass it forward to the city recorder, and we'll get you a chance to come up and talk. Mr. Joseph Moore, please. Good evening.
Thank you for letting us be here tonight and let us have our 3 minutes. I'm in the Wilsonville, in the Meadows Loop neighborhood, right near the high school. We came last month, and I wanted to thank you that you responded to our request and you made changes. I want to thank you for putting up the speed sign, putting the signs up, putting up the speed. What would you call it? Speed monitor.
Well, it does two things. It alerts people to how fast they're going, and it also measures how fast they're going and compiles a bunch of data for us to see whether it's anecdotally a problem or if it's actually a problem.
So, and I especially want to thank Ben for reaching out to us with emails and keeping us informed. That was very kind. So thank you for responding to us. I know that there's another, I think it's the 19th, there's going to be another a meeting that's going to be happening. So I'm afraid that I won't be able to be there. I'm coming back from visiting my brother in Ireland. So I wanted to take this chance to thank you for that. We're looking forward to that study of the speed. That's key to being able to communicate back and forth. So that will be great.
We'll probably do two. We'll do one this summer, and then when school starts back up, we'll do another 2-week or a week. Depends on how long we can get it because it's in demand throughout the city, but at least 1 week so that we can compare summer, non-school versus school.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and school is just about to start. So anyway, thank you very much. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll keep working with you on that. Jamie Arbon, please.
Hi, Council. Jamie Arbin, Wilsonville resident since '94. My address is on my comment card. I stepped out just a moment ago to take a moment to publicly thank, and I'd like to now publicly thank Senator Thatcher for showing up and all of her work in helping the Dixon family, a Wilsonville family, a mother who is currently trying to help her child fight her cancer naturally, and her child has been medically kidnapped. Senator Thatcher has stood behind her and helped the mother and the daughter, Wilsonville residents, work to take the medicine that is actually curing her cancer instead of forcing her to take medication that is already proven that it's not helping. I'm coming to you today, as I mentioned in every council meeting that I've been coming to since April, my 3-minute, twice a month be ignored. But I wanted to tell you what CBD does and why we need to overturn the bill that you have in House right now that taxes cannabis illegally against the Measure 91 that passed in 2015. Cannabidiol, what is it? CBD. It's a part of the plant, just like the THC that everybody's scared of, but it actually, scientifically, Journal of American Medicine has proven studies that cannabis, CBD in specific, is antibacterial, inhibits cancer cell growth, is a neuroprotectant. That means it protects your brain. Lou Gehrig's disease patients, Parkinson's patients experience the sloth of the growth and progressiveness of their disease when they add cannabis to their regimen. It reduces blood sugar levels, helping people with diabetes use less insulin, which, given the cost of our medications, is huge. It reduces seizures and convulsions, so children with epilepsy don't have to take drugs that turn them into vegetables to go to school. It reduces inflammation. It reduces function in the immune system, so when, like me, you have cancer and experience inflammatory issues, CBD helps to naturally calm that. It helps reduce the risk of artery blockage. Heart attack, anyone? Reduces small intestine contractions, reduces vomiting and nausea, which I can tell you after chemo helped me an immense amount. I could go on, but I have 30 seconds, so I'll come back in a couple more weeks and continue my education, beg my city council to not ignore me, and put the law into place that every other city does, allowing cannabis at 3%, not 12%. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John's Whiskey, please.
Hello.
Good evening.
Thanks for giving me a minute to speak. I just recently moved to Meadows Court, and talking to my neighbors, there's several of the neighbors that are concerned about the parking issue in the segment of Southwest Meadows Loop from the beginning of the high school up until the cul-de-sac. Are we all familiar with what segment of the road we're talking? Anyway, I walk my dog there every day, and I see it every day, so it's just not intermittent. Constant, continuous parking, blocking both sides of the roadway. The roadway, I don't believe, was obviously never configured to accommodate that many cars parking. And so in this instance, when you have that many cars along the roadway, you're basically straddling the middle of the roadway, and i.e. you could, oncoming traffic, whatever. So in my opinion, and as well as the other neighbors that I've spoken to, it's hazardous and maybe something should be done about it, which I'm hoping that you would address the issue. And it's, from my understanding, it's a residential parking zone ordinance. Are you familiar with the Ordinance 804 that was enacted up at the upper end of Meadows Loop by Boulder Creek Apartments? Well, what we're asking is, what we're hoping is that council could address this issue and possibly eliminate this type of hazard, traffic congestion in the mornings. And it's just a mess. And I'm not, my personal opinion of it is that the high school students park there during the day. And it's a hazard, but one other thing that they really do, and I mean, it's their children, they trash the area. They go for their lunch, okay? And what they'll do is they'll dump their garbage on the sidewalk, on the street, in the park area. And sure, I could be on the phone 24/7 calling, the safety officers or our local police. But again, that shouldn't be happening. Plus, they smoke in the park. pot, whatever. They sit and hide in the play structures and smoke their pot. But anyway, getting back to it, is that I do hope that we continue to keep this abreast and keep this on the agenda about this residential parking zone. So thanks a million. You have a good evening.
Thank you. Mr. Rob Bynum, please.
Thank you for your time tonight. Rob Bynum, also a resident of Wilsonville on Meadows Loop. I'll keep my comments real quick. I just wanted to kind of just further support that we need to address the issue there on that street. Thank you very much for putting up the speed monitor on there. One thing I'd ask you to do is to make sure that we're also capturing the speed coming from the north to south, because that's a long straightaway, so people are usually coming into that corner hot, coming down. So right now, it looks like it's measuring it when you're coming out of that corner. So if we can catch it both directions, that would be good data to have. I'm going to be real straightforward on what I think we need to do there. I'm not an expert on it, but just in general, I think what would be tremendously helpful is if we could limit parking, do one of two things, either limit parking to one side of the street or reduce the speed in the corner. Right now, if it's, I believe it's 25 miles an hour through residential, so if two cars are going the speed limit, they're closing at 50 miles an hour on a blind corner. So under the best conditions, it's really dangerous. And I think that's really where we need to go with this. I'm someone who fully supports collecting data and making informed decisions, so I'm glad we're doing that. If we can just kind of keep collecting that, and hopefully we can do something, get something done about that soon. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other speaker cards. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak? If not, we will move on then to mayor's business. Seems like a lot is going on. I'm trying to remember all. I had pleasure of welcoming the Street of Dreams builders and supporters to their grand opening ceremony, which we had last Friday, I think it was, and that was nice. Council President Ackerval and I have been conducting interviews with some of the applicants for the vacant city council position. We have some more of that to do this week, and we'll have a recommendation, I believe, for council by next meeting for council to have a list of finalists, which the whole council will then interview at that point in time. We had a Clackamas County Business Alliance breakfast forum sponsored by the City of Wilsonville and Smart Transit that had a presentation on Clackamas Workforce Partnership and talking about better coordinating our workforce development resources with our business community. And I thought that was vigorous discussion and a lot of good information. Attended the JPAC, Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation meeting, which continues to be an interesting dialogue as all the different transportation issues around the region kind of percolate along. Attended the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meeting where transportation and transit issues were very high up on the discussion, as well as housing issues, especially the housing study on the regional wide basis and the county housing authority that will be recipient of some of the metro housing bonding money and is looking for partnerships with cities around the county to proceed with affordable housing projects. I'm not sure that we are quite that far along. We have our affordable housing task forces working on things, and does not have recommendations for us yet. Also had the pleasure of meeting with Clackamas County President Cook and having a good discussion with a couple of staff. Our economic development manager, Jordan Vance, was in attendance at that also, and we had some good ideas about how things might move forward. The Metro Transportation 2020 Funding Task Force is upcoming here soon, which I'll be in attendance at. That group is kind of waiting on inputs from their technical advisory committees that have been looking at individual transportation corridors around the region with an eye to making some statistically based or analytically based, I guess I should say, recommendations about what would be most helpful. And there are several Clackamas County corridors under consideration in that process. We have the let's see, I had a nice meeting. They had 3 of the Metro councilors that came out to Wilsonville, and we had a kind of a quiet sit down and talked about how the transportation funding task force is moving forward and whether it's meeting the needs or on track to meet the needs that we have. We kind of agreed on some areas that need to be beefed up on that process, and I think that will be true going forward, and we will continue to work on that. I want to remind everybody that we have an upcoming block party. I think it's the 15th, is that right? In our town center park area here, which was a great event the last couple of years we've had it, have lots of attendance, and I hope people will come out for that. So I think that's really all I need to talk about under my business, but let me hand off, if I may, to Councilor President Ackervall.
Thank you. Since our last council meeting, I was able to be part of the ribbon cutting ceremony or reopening, I guess, for the changes that have been made at Bullwinkle's. And that was a fun event to be at. Bullwinkle's has done a lot to partner with the city, and it's fun to be there when we reflect on, the reindeer romp event that, they've helped. And I will say there is really nothing cuter than a bunch of young children running around with tiny reindeer antlers, running on the race car track, the little go-kart track, I mean, they've done that. You think about all of the different events that is both at that facility, but also, you see the vouchers in the summer reading packets from them. And, there's just so many different ways that they've been supportive of the community. So that was fun to be there. Also attended the Oregon Zoo tour along with Councilor West, and that was great to see some of the conservation work that's being done at our local zoo. And it's always fun to go visit the zoo too, I mean, to be honest. So, also the Street of Dreams opening, and Willamette Intake Facility meeting last Monday as well. So it's been a busy time. Oh, and then also I wanted to kind of pause and mention the Fun in the Park this last weekend. I go to that every year, I think, and just thank you so much to the different businesses that are involved in supporting that event. It's great that it is so accessible. It's totally free for all the kids to participate in. And it reminds me of the value that our city has put on having these active activities available for all kids in the city. So, and actually, now that I think about one other event along those lines, last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago, 2 weeks ago, presented a certificate on behalf of the city to Mitchell Robinson that did a free basketball camp again in the community for kids. In our community, it was an all-day clinic, met and spoke with him, for a little bit, as well as his high school basketball coach that was involved all the way from New Orleans was here to help facilitate and coach at the camp. And it was great to see that gift to the youth in our community. So that was fun to be part of as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, just to take off on that, I would thank Councilor Ackerval for taking the ball on, so to speak, on that one, because I got the call late on that, and I was going to, I was in Florence for a cemetery commission meeting, and so I couldn't, they had called and asked, and I was trying to find somebody, and the mayor was busy, and the city manager was busy, and I don't know if I called you, I didn't call you, but I turned it over to someone, and they were asking for a certificate, so I believe that perhaps it was Kim or
It was Kim and Zoe.
Zoe who invented a certificate on short notice that we could present to him, because that was such a generous event to hold for the kids. And so appreciate the quick response that we had with very short notice on that one. Two other things, not quite as active to mention coming up, because we're into August and it won't go on, summer won't go on forever, is Movies in the Park. So we have Movies in the Park coming up on the 9th, which is this Friday, at the River Shelter at 9 o'clock, and then again on the 23rd, which is 2 Fridays from then. And I don't know if we have any after that. I doubt it.
I think so. Those are the
I think that's it. So you have 2 more chances at Movies in the Park, which is a lot of fun. Way to spend a summer evening. And then I usually mention the McMiniman's History Pub, which is on the last Tuesday of the month, this one being the 27th, but I have no idea what this is about. I'm just looking at it. It's Portland's Pinball Racketeers and the FBI's Most Wanted. So apparently in the 50s, pinball machines were illegal in Portland and Milwaukee and elsewhere in the, I don't know if we had any here, but, and so there was a racketeering business around pinball, getting them into restaurants and bars and such. So that's what the topic is. I don't know anything about this topic, but it sounds very interesting if you ever were interested in pinball and didn't know that it used to be illegal. So that will be on the 27th. Doors open at 5 and the program starts at 6:30. That's it.
And pinball's different than Pinterest, is that right?
Yes.
Councilor West.
I had the honor of going to the Street of Dreams for the industry night. There's a lot of events at the Street of Dreams, which we are so lucky to have in Wilsonville. It's a huge regional draw, and many people will be visiting our city. And these homes are beautiful, and I'm really excited that we have the honor to host it this year. So that was a fun night for that opening for a lot of the builders and the real estate agents and title companies. And that was just before the big grand opening to the public. And then tomorrow, I know that I may be reporting on however this goes, is that I'll be able to represent the city for the Veterans Day. I was available for that because one of my rare days off is tomorrow. So I will, during the work week, will be able to represent the city for that. So I'm excited to do that with the veterans. And then Council President Ackerval stated, I was at the zoo. I brought my 11-year-old niece, Twyla, and it was a really fun and amazing event. I'm a little early to be at the zoo. We were there real early. But you walk in and they had like some Amazonian porcupine hanging out with the zookeeper that we got to walk up to. And then on the other side, there was a large female African owl, some species of owl that was really neat. And then we walked through the different things that make the Oregon Zoo unique. Now, if you haven't been to the zoo recently, you got to go. I mean, it is absolutely amazing, some of the work and conservation stuff that they're doing, specifically with like condors. There's a new lamprey exhibit. The elephant exhibit's one of the finest in the world with what they've done there. So I hadn't been there since my son was a little tyke, and it is so different. Had a really great conversation with other electeds. And one thing that I think that is interesting is the new push coming out of the zoo to do non-lead ammunition for sportsmen. So shotgun ammunition and centerfire ammunition that is not lead-based, that is specifically dangerous for birds of prey, condors, which we will learn. We will soon have condors here in Oregon within, what they say, 5 years? Within
Will be
released within 3 to 5 years?
California, and they're
300-mile range, right? So they'll be coming up, and then I guess Lewis and Clark were hanging out with condors back here in our region back in the day. So those were fun things to learn. So it was absolutely great. Go to the zoo, and the summer's going by so fast. So one of the events that I love to go to every Thursday is the Villaball Farmers Market. So if you haven't had a chance to go the food truck vendors are great. We always get our fresh berries for the week, a fresh bouquet of flowers for the kitchen table. Their honey, home crafts, that they're it's so wonderful, the Villaball Farmers Market. And the concerts have been really good this year. The last couple concerts were a lot of fun, and I was able to go to put on by the Rotary, and that's just over here by the Korean Memorial. So I would recommend, if you haven't had the opportunity, to go check out. Are there any more? Is there one more? Is there?
I feel like there is.
I think there might be.
There will be. We will have entertainment for our block party.
Then there's entertainment at the block party. Yes. But so, yeah, summer's going by fast. Get in some time to enjoy the sun, spend time with your family, loved ones, and we have still things going on here in the rest of the month for you to attend to get those things done. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, can I add one thing
Yes.
to Councilor West? With regards to the zoo, having made this trip several times with kids, if you can go in the weekday, the perfect way to go, not with little tiny ones who tire out too quickly, but kids over 7 or 8, is to go on the commuter rail. And you get on commuter rail in Wilsonville, get off in Beaverton, and get on the Max, and you get off right at the zoo. You come right up at the front door, and you can spend. And the trick is to take the last train out and catch the first one back, because we don't have a midday train. So it makes it a long day. But if you're willing to have lunch at the zoo and then maybe go up to the forestry center or something, then get back on the train and come back. The train is, both the Max and the commuter rail are events on their own for kids who don't usually take trains around, and they're two very different kinds of trains, but you go directly to the zoo, and but of course it doesn't run on the weekend. But if you can do it on a weekday, I would highly recommend it, as long as you're prepared for that amount of time. Good way to get there.
Thank you very much. We do have a little bit of real business to do here, so we should move forward onto our consent agenda if we could.
Resolution number 2665, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a lease agreement with Clackamas 800 Radio Group for the use of city-owned property on Level C Reservoir Parcel A as a wireless communication facility tower site.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. We approve consent agenda as read. One item. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes 4-0. Bringing us to continuing business on Ordinance 837.
Ordinance number 837 on second reading, an ordinance of the City of Wilsonville amending Wilsonville Code Sections 8.010 and 4.179. And I would say we have not received any comments since the last
No
reading.
comments or further staff input on that at this point?
No.
This is a code change that we had extensive discussion about over a period of time preceding. And is council ready to take action, or are there any questions for staff or concerns?
Your Honor, I move to adopt ordinance number 837 on second reading.
I second.
Moved and seconded, we adopt 837 on second reading. This will require a roll call vote, if we could, please.
Counselor West?
Yes.
Council President Akroval? Yes. Counselor Lehan?
Yes.
Mayor Knapp?
Yes, passes 4-0. Thank you very much. And that brings us to city manager business.
Happy birthday.
Tomorrow.
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 Rumor is she's 29.
Any legal business?
Well, ditto on the birthday, but I do have a couple of other items as well. Number one, the Liuba appeal on the Basalt Creek decision by Peter Watts was filed last week, and we have oral arguments now scheduled for September 2nd on Basalt Creek. So between now and then, I will be working on an intervener's brief and preparing for oral arguments. And we have another case, the Subaru case against Wilsonville, which is in the Court of Appeals. Their brief was filed. However, I don't think you'll be surprised by this, but it was kicked back by the Court of Appeals for errors in filing. So they have 2 weeks to correct their errors, or else their case will be dismissed. So that's the story on our two active litigation cases. Then there's another litigation case that we're not a party to, but it's interesting because it's on public records law, and it involves a West Lynn city councilor. And that was a decision that actually came down in favor of the city councilor, with the judge finding that her notes from, I think she took notes during city council meeting, her notes were not considered public record because she is not considered a public body. And for records to be considered public records, they have to be records of a public body, which apparently none of you are, according to this judge's ruling. So I brought a copy of the letter ruling just because I thought you might find it interesting, and it's pretty short. Then I also brought along a copy of a front page editorial done by the Oregonian saying that the decision was wrong, and hoping that somebody was going to appeal. Interesting thing is the party who brought the case was, I believe he's 17 years old, and he defended it pro se. In other words, he didn't have a lawyer there. So, so part of what they're saying is, this decision was based on a noble effort by a young gentleman without a lawyer. And so there's hope that somebody else might take it up on appeal. But, so that was the Oregonian's position, but the judge was clearly on the side of the West Lynn City Councilor, and as of now, with no appeal, her records are not, her notes taken during the city council meeting are not considered to be public record. So that's that, and I'll give you all each a case or a copy of the case when we're done here.
Good, because no one could read my notes.
Okay. Anything further for council?
Keep 'em.
If not, I will call us adjourned at 8:22 and wish you all a good evening.